Hello, and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Spectrum. Every age, every need. I am your host, Shawn Francis, and I am joined by my co-host, my cousin, my partner in Thrive in Crime, Mr. Maurice McDavid. Maurice, good to see you.
Hello, everybody. Hello, hello.
And today we are going to be talking about what is, I think, sort of a $1 million question, which is what does autism mean to you? Because it is different to each person based on their experience, based on the diagnosis, based on what that plays out on a day to day basis, and then based on who you are. And that's determined, obviously, based on your experience in life. So we'll get right into it on another episode of Beyond the Spectrum. All right, as we drop the groove, let's begin by thanking our partners, Billy Footwear. Billy Footwear, they are makers of adaptive footwear for everyone. The story of the founder, Billy Price, is one that is beyond inspiration. Billy was paralyzed and had to learn how to do everything over for himself. And he was able to do that with the exception of putting on a shoe. A prototype was made, and Billy Footwear was born. They've sold over 1 million shoes, 1 million pairs. Those are two different things. They sold over 1 million pairs and have impacted countless lives. And if you click on the link in the show notes and at our website and in our posts, you will get 10% off your final purchase. And that includes when they have sale events. The other thing we want to do is encourage you to join our men's group, which is known as The Den. That is a support group that is created for men who are caregivers to those with special needs or a diagnosis. Maurice, if you can, just before we jump into it, tell our viewers just a little bit about what the Den has been like and meant to you.
Yeah, having been one of the original attendees at the Den, I can speak to that. It's a place where dads can come and unload, um, or share, or encourage, or
Or
just
listen.
realize that you're not, yeah, or listen, realize you're just not on your own, that there are others who are facing similar challenges, similar blessings, um, have similar questions. And it's just a very encouraging, validating space for men who are taking care of family members who have various diagnoses. So it's been a blessing for me in so many ways. We could do a whole show on that for sure.
And we
Um,
will.
yeah, there you go. I'm just going to encourage you, if you're a dad, if you're a man um, that is in a caregiving role, I can't imagine how this wouldn't be a blessing to you. So that's my
Yeah,
pitch.
there you go. And I'll just say one last thing about it. I was invited to be a member of a men's group at the financial services firm that I belonged to. It was a business that was very focused on faith, family, and finances, and in those, that order and everything.
Mm.
And I thought, a bunch of dudes sitting around a campfire trying to figure out who's got the grisliest beard and who has the biggest kill. That's not me. Did that for about a year and a half, 2 years, and came to realize that if society doesn't encourage men to state their insecurities or uncertainties, generally speaking, how much more would that apply in our community for those of us that are caregivers? So I created it thinking I was going to do this great thing for other people and it'd be good for me too, and I'd get something out of it. And I realize now more than ever that it is as much for me as it is anybody else. The guys that are in the group, including Maurice, just
Mhm.
make me. I'm so blessed um, to have that. And so we meet bi-weekly on Zoom. Registration is free, and that link can be found in the show notes as well as at the website. So let's talk about what does autism mean to you. So each April, I will usually make several posts during Autism Awareness Month stating what autism means to me, knowing that each situation is different based on each person's perspective. But what made me think about it, quite frankly, was this week's call on the for the Den, and one of the dads said, we were talking about as we record this. This is the Wednesday after this year's Super Bowl, and we were talking about the Super Bowl and Bad Bunny's performance and inclusion versus exclusion and all these different things. And we were talking about inclusion with regard to different communities. And one of the dads in the group talked about, when we talked about inclusion in terms of what a portrayal of special needs or autism looks like in film, one of the dads said, he says, I think that the pictures are so rosy and they'll
Mm,
show some challenges, but they're very minimal and it
mhm,
doesn't get to the ugly of it. So it almost seems fake and less than genuine despite the intention. And so with that said, I want us to begin with as real as we can. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly.
mm.
And with each topic, we're going to have subtopics. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the ugliest of challenges. And so I'm just not running my mouth going, Maurice, I'll let you go first, but we'll talk about the ugliest or scariest, the worst of autism when we talk about what it means to you. And we'll get to the good stuff too, because we want to close out with that so that we can offer hope. Our intention
Absolutely.
is to make sure that you feel that, you're not alone. Um, what would you say, Maurice, based on your experience as a father to a young adult male with autism, is what's the ugliest? Talk about the ugliest parts based on your experience.
Well, I'll be honest, I think it starts with the diagnosis. We all have dreams for our kids, right? And hopes and dreams and things that we think we'd love for them.
Mm-hmm.
And having to adjust those dreams and those visions with a diagnosis is hard. I don't know how else to say it. It's For me, it's taken many years to process that. It's taken kind of um, a different series of sadnesses. I mean, my son is an amazing blessing to me, so don't get me wrong. But we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about the ugly, and some of the ugly is I don't have a neurotypical child. They're not going to have a neurotypical development. They may never achieve some of the things that we wish for our children, um, and so that's it's an ugly process. It's a difficult I don't know about ugly, but it's a difficult process
Yeah.
to go through emotionally, mentally, um, and come out the other side of it. So when you say ugly, that's kind of the first thing that strikes me is right after diagnosis. Of course, you want to jump in and do all these crazy therapies and hope you get your kid back as close to neurotypical in development behavior as possible. But all diagnoses are different, so that may be possible for some. It may
Mm-hmm.
be impossible for others. And so for me, that's kind of the first piece of what struck me as ugly. Now there's all kinds of things. My son probably really wasn't potty trained until 4 or 5,
Right.
and for a while there, he used to like go hide behind the one of the couches in my office and take a dump. So, and this is at age 3 or 4, right? And it's like,
Right.
oh my God. So
And we've never talked about that.
no, so that's some ugliness, right? That's some ugliness. So fortunately for me, at the time,
Mhm.
rug doctor machines, you could actually buy those and not just rent them. So I was fortunate enough to buy one, and it allowed me to save my carpet many tragedies. But the work was not fun, but I was very grateful, and that machine has lasted to this day. So it was well worth whatever minute money I spent on it a thousand
Yeah.
times over. So
Yeah.
I mean, there's
It's,
lots of ugly.
yeah.
So that's one of them. We used to have this thing called fuzzy Ganeshes, and so my son would also love to eat apples, and then he'd throw them under furniture, like under couches and stuff, and you wouldn't know the core that is, right? And then
Yeah.
and then you'd be like, you see something and you pick up, and then there'd be this big pile of green mold, or mildew or whatever it is, and it was formerly an apple core, and you're like, oh my God. So
Wait
it
a
was
minute.
just stuff,
Hold
man.
on.
Yeah.
When you said fuzzy Ganesh, I was thinking of a product. Who came up
No.
with that term?
I don't know. I have 5 kids, so they come up with funny
Right.
names for all
It
kinds of
just
stuff. So,
sounded so official.
yeah, no, we call them. Oh, here's another fuzzy Ganesh, Dad. It's like, oh God, I gotta go clean that up. So there's that kind of stuff. And when you're in it, it's not so funny. Years later, it's hilarious,
No.
right? Like my kid taking at 4 taking a dump behind a couch. It's funny now, not funny then, right? So um,
Just the way you said it, though. It just
well, you know,
yeah, it sounds funny, and you do have to laugh at it.
yeah, you
But
have to laugh.
I'm laughing, thinking in the middle of it, I would just be so because I know what with puppies how that's happened.
Mm,
You know,
mhm.
where you're just like, why do I need to find out by way of odor? Like it's one
Yeah,
thing if I see you, but if it just
yeah,
sneaks up, like why did
yeah,
you do
yeah,
that?
yeah.
Um, and it's funny because so what we're gonna do is
Mm,
I'll explain it as such. What I came up with is the ugliest and then the best and the most hopeful, right? And under each category, so under each category, there's a subcategory. So we'll look at social, the
mhm,
effects on your relationships with your children,
mhm,
effects on your marriage, effects upon yourself, and then effects upon the way you view society. And we're going to look at those things both as it relates to the ugly
mm.
and the pretty or the hopeful.
Okay, so
Um,
the three things I've touched on have nothing to do with that, but okay, I'll try and
no, no,
stick
no.
within the boundaries.
Let's go the ugly. That's okay. That's okay. That's
Yeah.
um. So we'll do it that way, and then I will go as far as the ugly for me. Elijah wore um pull-ups until gosh, when was he potty trained? You said 4 or 5 for Isaac. I think Elijah might have been. Oh, he might have been 7 or 8 or something. I don't know. Because you know what interesting? What's interesting about what autism teaches you, especially, and I'm sure it would apply with any diagnosis. At least I think is that which seems like a mountain to
Mhm,
overcome,
mm,
or one that will always be there. Once you get past it, you never forget the struggle,
mm,
but in some ways, the struggle seems like yesterday, yet so very far away,
mhm,
because in life, generally speaking, especially in this day and age with technology, we're just so inundated. It's a challenge to be present, right?
mhm,
And so, um, I shouldn't say that. It's a challenge to stop and think about how far you've come because you are so present. I should say you're
mm,
so locked into, especially as a caregiver. You're on watch duty like the whole time, and
mhm,
so it's more of a challenge to stop and sit and reflect upon how far you've come. And you go,
mhm,
oh gosh, yeah, remember when he never did such and such? I never thought that would take place. And you're
mhm,
so used to it.
mhm,
So I think he might have been even 6 or 7. I don't know when he stopped wearing um, the pull-ups. So he
mhm.
didn't. So was Isaac wearing pull-ups for a while, and what he would do is just take the pull-up off and go?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, see, and that's where you don't know what would take place because Elijah never took them off. He had them. Matter of fact, his thing around the house was the pull-ups and a
Mhm,
t-shirt. Kind
mm,
of like the way a kid, a toddler would have a
mhm,
diaper and a t-shirt
mhm,
for the
mhm,
longest time. And so that's part of the ugly. Let's go to the subcategory of the social. I would say, um, I think it's the social. The first time there was any issue with elopement,
mm,
we had moved into this house that we were renting, and um, everybody was kind of doing their own thing. We hadn't been there that long, and
mhm,
uh, nobody kind of knew where he was, or but I was the one that didn't notice, and I asked his sister, I was like, "Where's Elijah?" And she was like, "I thought he was with you." I'm like, "Okay." And
mhm.
there's a gate on either side of the house that goes to the backyard, and one of them, you have one gate that kind of becomes your designated gate in and out of the backyard, and there's one that you
Mhm,
just almost never go through. We
mhm,
hadn't even put a lock on that one yet,
mm,
and it was wide open.
mm,
So I go through it and I'm walking out to the front of the house casually, and there's a guy walking up the street holding Elijah's hand.
mhm,
And
mhm,
at this point, he was, let's see, he's born in uh, 6. Are you talking about? He was the 3 or 4, maybe, at a time where he should be completely verbal.
right.
Um, and as the guy's walking up the street with him, I'm walking towards the guy, like, just kind of dumbfounded. The guy says, "Yeah, he was here on there's a major thoroughfare in Burbank where we lived at the time. goes through a portion of the San Fernando Valley here in Los Angeles, Glen Oaks Boulevard. Um, and the guy's just like, he was on Glen Oaks, like 3 lanes in. I'm
Oh
just like,
my gosh.
and he says, I asked him his name, but he didn't say anything. And I don't even remember if I said yes, he's on the spectrum or whatever. And I was just like,
Hmm.
what? I just didn't know what to say. So we came, got him back in, went out and got a lock right away.
Hmm.
And, and then we had one other instance where the same thing took place. And I guess this is social as well, where he just wasn't around. Like, kind of, where is he? And something told me to go to the backyard. And so I did. And then something told me to stand for a second and listen. And I did because he wasn't responding to anybody's calls. And as I stood still and listened, I could hear over the fence like a struggle. I look
Mm.
over the fence, and for those of you that are on any, that are viewing on YouTube, you'll see my hand is right at my chest. I look over the fence, and he's in the neighbor's pool, up to his
Oh my
chest,
goodness.
with the water rising because he's trying to avoid going into the deep end, and he's on his tiptoes.
Oh
And
my goodness.
I really don't remember going over the fence. I just remember being over the fence,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And we didn't know the neighbors well at all. Didn't know if they had dogs or whatever. And turns out they did, but they were in the house and they were barking up a storm.
Mm.
And I just went in fully clothed, got him out of the pool, and his sister came out. I put him over the fence, and um, I lost
Wow.
a portion of my shin in the form of skin, so it was like blood. And Laura got him in the tub and everything, got his clothes off, and I was just like, oh man, yeah, just in the moment. And I just sat there and probably lost like 5 pounds of water weight in the form of tears, just like
Hmm.
all of a sudden, because I was thinking, what if I was not at home?
Hmm.
He
Mm.
would have drowned for certain.
Mm.
Um, so that's probably the ugliest thing. And when you think about social, it's funny, the value of that puts things in perspective because from there on out, socially, I think the ugliest things from a social standpoint had to do with me caring too much about what other people thought,
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
or him being aware of people staring at him. We had a conversation the other day where you were telling me, um, actually, we were talking about on our call last night for the den. You were talking about a moment with family and prayer at a
Hmm.
Thanksgiving event, and being concerned about as they go around and each person says what they're thankful for. You're worried about Isaac, and I asked you, were you worried about how it would look or what people would think? Was it about you or was it about him? And you're like, oh no, you were really worried about him. And I think that's great because in my case, I at least think that Elijah is not necessarily as aware. So my
Mm.
concern is more like, or had been, how does that look? How does that look? I still think I care too much what other people think, but my
Mm.
concern at this point is more protective than
Mm.
anything else. I don't want him to feel bad.
Right.
Um,
Right.
talk about your ugly when it comes to the social aspect.
Um, well, there's always, we are human. We do have egos. We, I think that's kind of what drives so much of social media is people are trying to project an image of their life that's maybe not exactly accurate because
Hmm.
our egos are what they are, right? So
Yeah.
then we find ourselves in these situations where our kids are not neurotypical, and that becomes evident for whatever reason. They're stimming, they're making noise, they're screaming, they're having a meltdown, whatever that is.
Hmm.
I think it's very hard for any of us as humans to let go of concern for what other people think. But over time, you just start to realize these events kind of mean nothing to the people around. They don't, first of all, not that I don't care about people, but they mean nothing to my life, right?
Right.
Whether they're looking judgmentally, whether they're annoyed, what difference does it make? We're in this space together as humans for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and then they're off to their life, and I'm off to my life. So I
Hmm.
think I've come to that realization. It really has released me from being concerned about what people think of my son and the weird gestures he's making with his hand or the noises he's making. So,
Yeah.
um, but that was a process. And one of the things I thought for anybody who's listening to this, I want to acknowledge that when you're in it, you don't know when it's going to end. And some of this hard, ugly stuff can feel like, oh my God, is it going to be this way forever?
Right.
And I can almost assure you the answer is no. I mean, will my kid have autism forever? Yes. Will the manifestations that come out in his life that are difficult to handle last forever? Probably not. Most, well, maybe I shouldn't say that. My experience is that these things, like for example, when my son was going to the bathroom, on the carpet, it felt like, will this ever end? Because this is,
Hmm.
I don't love this task. It's hard. It's gross. Um, but it ended. And so many of the other things that I worried about when he was little, and then 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, 12, 13, 14, so many things I worried about, will it, am I going to have to deal with this forever? I haven't had to. So
Yeah.
um, I just want to kind of put that out there as an encouragement for those who are in it. I understand that when you're in it, you don't know when it's going to end, and it feels like forever, and it can be mentally and emotionally draining. But this too shall pass, as the old saying
Took the words right out of my
happens to
mouth. I
be.
was
Yeah,
thinking that. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and you read my mind in more ways than none, because I was thinking that, for somebody that's listening and new to a diagnosis or going through
Mhm,
something where they feel alone, because we created this platform to remind people that they are not alone. And
mhm,
now more than ever in this world and in this country, especially, we
mhm,
need to be reminded of the things that we have in common as opposed to otherwise,
mhm,
because there are so many things taking place that seek to divide us.
mhm,
And we just want to let people know that they're not alone.
mhm,
And it goes back to what I was saying before. When you think back about certain things that they may have done or didn't do, that now are just, you know, completely flipped. Those things take place. And I understand too that it's more of a challenge if you're not part of a team and you're a single parent.
mhm.
But the progress is there, and you have to take each day, one day at a time. It's as true as it sounds corny.
Mhm.
It really is the truth. Uh, and I know that for some people listening, the ugly part from a social standpoint is, we just said that our ugly from a social standpoint dealt with how other people might think and little idiosyncrasies of stimming and stuff like that. There are people out there who have situations that neither one of us have experienced that
Mhm.
are full blown gargantuan ugly, to the point where maybe they can't take their child to the store and things like that. And we want
Yeah,
them to know also that they are not alone.
yeah. I want to acknowledge that because I am aware of a family whose son now is, I think he's 16, and
Hmm.
he is now kind of in CPS services because um, he had very violent tendencies towards his little brother.
Hmm.
And so they, as a family, are kind of heartbroken right now because he's not in their home anymore, and that was more driven out of the protection for their younger son.
Right.
Um, and their older son could not control those violent tendencies. So it's a heartbreaking situation, and I don't want to undersell the realities that are out there. And it is called a spectrum for a reason. There are those kids who are can go to regular school and with some support graduate and go on to college. There are some kids who are semi-verbal, and the idea of college is probably not on the horizon. There are some kids who are non-verbal,
Hmm.
and then there are kids who have all manner of manifestations out of the autism diagnosis. And we here want to acknowledge it all, and never want to pretend that we understand it all, we faced it all. That's not what we're here for. We love this community, and I know Shawn's hope and my hope is that these talks are an encouragement to keep going, because there's a lot of beautiful things that come, and I guess we're going to talk about that on the backside
Yeah,
of our conversation today.
we
But
will.
yes,
We will.
so just want to acknowledge that there's is very unique, family by family.
Yes, and in one of our previous episodes, our good friend and fellow co-host Susanna Peace Lavelle, I think you and Susanna really were talking about. I think it might have been the first episode we were talking about what this is. Is that none of us are experts. We're not here to
Mhm,
tell people what to do. The closest we will get to that is to say, "Here's my experience. Here's what I did, and it worked for me. If that's something that you want to try, feel free." And if you have something to say that is contrary to my experience, by all means tell me so that other people know they're not alone and we have the opportunity to learn from that too. And,
Absolutely.
and speaking of which, you can reach out to us by email at um, change the world at beyondthespectrumpodcast.com. I know that's a mouthful, but it is change the world at beyondthespectrumpodcast.com. Okay, so moving on, let's now talk about, still sticking with the ugly, the next subcategory being how autism has affected your relationship with your other children. Now, I know that there's people listening that may have just one child, and
Mhm.
each situation is different. But for those of us who have several children and one who is neurodivergent, there are ways in which the other children are affected, um,
Absolutely.
and a variety of them. One being having to acknowledge you as a parent that you may love differently, but you don't want that to be received as loving more or
Mhm.
less.
Mhm.
Um, why don't you go first on that?
Yeah, well, Isaac is my youngest of five. So I have three girls first and then two sons. Again, Isaac is the baby. Um, it's been a challenge there because he requires a level of kind of patience and acceptance of kind of out of the box accepted behaviors for neurotypical children.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been hard for some of my kids when they were younger, especially like basically, why are you giving in to Isaac when it comes to this and this? But when it was me, I didn't get that kind of, I didn't get that kind of grace or that space to include some of the behaviors in the way I was. Well, that wasn't accepted. It's like, well, when they're younger, it's very hard to explain to them why, as an autistic parent, you have to pick your battles because you can't be fighting your child 24/7, 365. You got to
Right.
learn to accept some of these things that cannot be controlled, and they're not detrimental to them or to the family. They might be annoying, but they're
Yeah.
not, they're not life threatening. They're not dangerous, and that, I have five kids. They all have very unique personalities and very unique views on life. Some of them are like my youngest daughter, who is the middle of the five children. She is incredibly close to Isaac, and she just
Mm-hmm.
has a heart of compassion and empathy and patience, and she's amazing with him. It's kind of mind blowing how she's
Mm-hmm.
able to talk him and de-escalate, and without her, we would have so much more work on our shoulders. A couple siblings are like, I'm living my life. I love Isaac, but got nothing to do with me,
Yeah.
kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Um, so the ugly part is, I would say that the frustration that a couple of his siblings kind of seem to forget that he has autism, and
Mm-hmm.
they are readily ignored by some of the noises, some of the behaviors. Just wish that there would be more compassion and empathy coming out of them towards him, and you can't
Mm-hmm.
make that be the case. And so that's been a point of frustration and a point of disappointment for both myself and my wife when it comes to a couple of our children, because they just don't seem to get it, and they're almost driven by the irritation of it all, and
And
that
it's
can be
tough too
really quite
because,
frustrating.
and I'm not just saying that because they're my family and I know them to be good kids or good people,
Hmm.
but the truth of the matter is that's frustrating, it's disappointing, but there's a certain amount of grace that has to be given because you and I talk about times
Hmm.
where we forget. And generally
Hmm.
speaking, especially from, well, culturally speaking, as a man and then as a black father, you
Hmm.
know, we were raised where you just don't talk back to your parents. And if you're
Hmm.
asked to do something, you do that. So when
Hmm.
your child, who because of their autism is going to be obstinate because of that, not just because there's some disobedient prick of a child,
Hmm.
you know, your first instinct, you've got more years as a child than you do as an adult to one with autism. So what's your go-to? That which you were raised with. And that which you were raised with is like, I said to do so and so. Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
more times than not, you're aware that it's autism, but every now and then you forget.
Yeah, and for me, I'd say in my somewhere in me, it translates into disrespect, and then my response is outsized for whatever the nature of the issue is, because it's hit a core thing in me that's my issue, that's not
Hmm.
accurate, but I read it as disrespect, and I'm like, I'm up, and I'm ready to not take that, and
Yeah.
fortunately, as I've gotten older and with my wife's many admonishments. I've been like, yeah, you're right. It's not about disrespect. It's not even about me. Remember,
Hmm.
and that then in turn, like you talked about, leads me to grace for my children, because first of all, I'm his parent. It's a very different dynamic as parents towards a neurotypical child versus siblings. They don't have that responsibility. It's not their children. They don't know
Hmm.
parental love. So I have to be really careful not to expect them to be able to look at him the way I do, or even
Right.
have the levels of patience or understanding or kindness that I do, because he's my son, very different than he's their sibling. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to
And that's
remind
why we have
myself of
to.
that often.
Yes, and that's why we can never stop punching in the clock on the
Mm-hmm.
job of raising our consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
getting better and evolving. Because without doing that, you're just you're gonna do what you do and be who you are. And well, that's just the way things are. If that's the
Mm-hmm.
case, then we shouldn't even have the technology to sit here. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so we have to make sure that we're continuously growing and evolving. And each situation is different. So in our case, we have, as you know, 7 children. Elijah
Mm-hmm.
is my only biological child. My wife has 2 daughters from her previous marriage who are um, um, have moved out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they're in their 30s, which is mind blowing to say. Um, but um, we also first became legal guardians to and eventually adopted my sister in law's 4 children.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the girls, um, we were having a conversation the other day. What was it? Oh, um, she and my wife were gonna go someplace. I think it was her classes for college or something, and they were talking about, um, and it's a community college, not too far away, and they were talking about. She was telling her about what the day was going to entail in terms of um, registration and everything on that day, and my wife is um, right now, especially going through like a real growth phase. We both are together. And so, what can I try new? And so my wife has made a comment, maybe I should check out the classes or whatever. And it was just kind of a passing thought. But she thought she was going to go with her. And Elijah had a basketball game on the same day. And he asked my wife to go to the game. Usually I take him to the game, I take him to practice. And
Mm-hmm.
he had asked her from the day before. So she's like, she decided that, she's going to go to his game. And when I took her to the registration just to drop her off, it led to a very open and honest conversation about disappointment and things that she dealt with when she was even younger with regard to different levels of attention that Elijah might need. And she was just very honest about how at times she was hurt. And she had never said that. So we learned some things about communication too, because the other thing I thought was her personality is one that is very she's certain. She's I don't know if I want to say gruff. Like what she's not like touchy feely and affectionate, that kind of thing. Like I learned from her that when she asks where I'm going or what time I'm going to be back, especially when she was smaller, that's her saying I love you. Because we say I love you to each other, like all of us.
Mm-hmm.
She's the last one to adapt to that, and
Mm-hmm.
because that's just not who she is. But her love language is to ask her, are you okay? Did you need anything, or where are you going? And
Mm-hmm.
so because of that, and she seemed so certain, I didn't think that she was hurt, despite the fact that we would say to them, look, you do realize he needs these things. Elijah needs this and needs that. We
Mm-hmm.
love you just the same. And then we would do things individually with them without him,
Mm-hmm.
because he gets his one on one anyway, just to make sure that took place. So we weren't really aware that she had felt hurt by that, because the other thing is she didn't want to appear she didn't want to appear she didn't want to be a problem. She didn't want to be a
Mm-hmm.
burden to anyone. So
Mm-hmm.
she never said anything. So
Mm-hmm.
those things take place. And so for somebody who has more than one child, and has one neurodivergent child amongst several others who are neurotypical, don't ever take for granted that they may be affected by the different level of care that you have to give. Don't take for granted that they don't see that as more love and them getting less.
Mm-hmm.
And they may not be aware of it too, depending on their age and the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, okay, sticking with the ugly, next subtopic. Talk about how autism, the effects that autism has had on your marriage.
That's a whole nother show too in itself. I mean,
Yeah, I
both good
know.
and bad. But
Well, just the challenges for now.
well, the challenges I think is so much energy is drawn out of you in vigilance and care for a neurodivergent child that it
Hmm.
leaves less space and energy for your marriage. That's kind of the reality.
Yeah.
Um, or so much of that energy is about partnering to care for your child that it's
Hmm.
really almost kind of not about you two relating to one another. It's you're partnered in this enterprise of doing as much as you can to bring the richest life you can to this neurodivergent child.
Hmm.
um, and that deflects some of the energy you might have had for one another in that direction. And so I mean, as we've talked about, that's why I think the divorce rate in for
In
families
our
with
community.
in our community is incredibly high
Hmm.
because and then there's just the stress and exhaustion of caring for or being a caregiver. There's just
Right.
parts of it are amazing and parts of it are really hard. And when
Yeah.
you're stressed and life feels hard, a lot of times that comes out on your partner, right?
Hmm.
In arguments, in attitude, in unwillingness to do more, be more, provide more. You're just like, I got no gas in the tank. So
Yeah.
I think that is incredibly challenging, and I think for many couples, it really becomes about the enterprise of raising your kid, and it's not even really about your partnership as a couple anymore. It's about co-parenting as opposed to marriage. So
Yeah.
that's a real. It feels like it's very hard to get out of that rut because you
Hmm.
kind of where that path went, and the wagon wheels are in the ruts, and it's really hard to get them up out of the ruts. And
Yeah.
so I think that can also be a reality for
Yeah.
what goes
Yeah.
on in a
Yeah.
marriage. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, because let's just be real about it. If you talk about the list of things, what is it that takes place? What is it challenge? And each situation is different based on the diagnosis, based on how it plays out. Um, you know, let's just be real and talk about like your fire, your romance, your heat, so to speak,
Mm,
right? Your
mm,
passion,
mhm,
your sexual whatevers. You just
mm,
like you're so that in addition to like you said, just the connecting part, right?
mhm,
Because there isn't
mhm,
anything necessarily sexual about a date night where you go to a movie or you have a
mhm,
meal and you
mhm,
sit down and look at each other and just connect, right?
mhm,
But
mhm,
all of that is what gets tested, you know,
mhm,
every last bit of it. And the thing about that is that when something is blatantly ugly, um, you know, there's holes. If it's a face, there's busted lip, teeth missing, black eye, or whatever have you. If it's a car, there's dents, you know,
mhm, mhm,
um, rust or whatever have you. That's a house that's dilapidated, the roof caved in, whatever have you. That's obvious ugly, you
mhm,
know. But then there's death of a thousand cuts,
mhm,
right? Where there isn't a dent, but a scratch. One scratch leads to two, to three, to four. You know, so
mhm, mhm,
those are things that make that happen. And again, we're so busy. Each situation is different, but when you're caregiving and you're just like in it, it's
mhm,
a challenge to look outside and step back for a second. You've heard me talk about, before. Einstein had a saying that said, we can't solve a problem at the same level of consciousness at which it occurs. So you're in
mhm,
the eye of the storm. If you're not able to step out every now and then, you don't even know what you're dealing with. So that's where those things, come up. And we've had those challenges too. I think what's helped us. We'll talk about that as we get to when we get to the pretty or the solution, but
mhm,
that's where the challenges come in, especially for men and women, depending on how you're raised. And for you
Mhm.
and I, talking about being raised by Black men whose thought is you don't talk back and you do as you're told, you know,
Mhm.
you that's another thing too. I don't know how many people, and I'd be curious for viewers to answer this for us. How many people, when they get married, or before they get married and they start dating, do they have any idea what their parenting style might be? Now, you don't know until you have children, but
Mhm.
you have an idea as to how you would raise a child. The way you were raised, you're either going to do as you experienced as a child, or you're determined to do the exact opposite. And
Yeah.
where that your parenting language, for lack of a better term,
Mhm.
if that language is not the same as your partner or
Mhm.
your spouse, or you can't identify that it's different
Mhm.
and plug and play the strengths versus the weaknesses, then you have conflict right there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You kind of talked about fire. It, for years, for long stretches, and sometimes we had a cot in our room where Isaac stayed. And so,
Mhm.
really hard to stir up some fire when your kid's right there in the cot next to your bed. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
good night. So, there are, and I'm sure this is why I brought it up, is I'm sure it's a reality for other homes with autism. Is you end up sharing your room with your kid because either you don't have enough bedrooms, or they are hard to get them to go down at night and that kind of thing. So
Hmm.
um yeah, there it is not an easy, it's not an easy task, to
Yeah.
try and stay
Yeah.
connected in the midst of it all. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And our situation has been absolutely no different.
Mm,
Yeah, like I said, we could do a whole show on that.
mm,
But just because I'm an optimist, before we get to the pretty, what I will
mhm,
say is that, on one hand, these things challenge our, marriages and relationships in our community so much more so. But on the other
mhm,
hand, there's the capacity to strengthen, because it's going to challenge it, but eventually challenging it is a guarantee. That's non-negotiable.
mhm.
But whether it strengthens it or breaks it irreparably is a different story. And one of those two things will take place, because it can also strengthen that situation depending on what your foundation is, you know? Um,
True,
so
true.
that's definitely true.
Or it can be true at one time and not true at another time. So there are cycles in
Exactly.
life, right, where it
Yep.
strengthens your relationship, and then at another point in time, it might be breaking it down. So we are we are ever in motion, right? Time is always
Right.
moving forward, and we are always aging, and we are always learning, and we are always being hit by good and bad things in life. So it is the thing is, it's never static. So
No.
yeah.
And it's something to keep in mind too, as you're saying that, in that, so if you're in a situation where, let's say, it's not the best and it's being challenged,
Mm.
if you can stick it out, if you first of all know what you have, and again, we're not experts, this is just, you know Laura and I've been married for 20 years. How many years did you and Florence have, Maurice?
30, 36,
Yeah.
36.
Okay.
Mhm.
So we're not pros, we're not experts, not better than anybody else. But if you can have a marriage challenged by it, and you're able to be together, and neither one of us is in a marriage that is, you know, "Let's stick together for the kids. This is miserable, but we're here. We're happy with our wives and
Mhm.
blessed and grateful for them. And each feel like we just live these amazing lives because of them. And you don't get to that point unless you realize and know what you have in terms of a foundation.
Mhm.
Knowing that and remembering who you're with as well as who you are is what allows you to face the unforeseen, because you don't know what's around the corner. Um, so talk about, if we can, because obviously time is creeping up on us, uh, the effects, again, sticking with the ugly, the effects upon yourself that being a caregiver has had.
Well, there was a time when I started to lose hair, and I could have taken minoxidil or any of those other things, but Isaac, my son, loves to kiss the top of my head. So I did not have the opportunity to take advantage of that therapy to keep my hair, because I didn't want him growing hairy lips because he was always kissing the top of my head. So I sit bald here today because one of the ugly things is I couldn't do any kind of hair loss treatments because I didn't want my son to end up with hairy lips. So
Yeah, because I was like, hairy lips. I was like, oh, you mean putting the minoxidil on his lip?
And then exactly.
Yeah,
So anyway, I had to just accept going bald, and that's just the way it's going to be because my son's health came first over my vanity. So
yeah.
that's a thing. That's kind of silly, but yeah, it's
No,
something that I've
no.
always kind of touched on. It's like, yeah, it was just the reality of it is I couldn't do that because I
You know
love
what I
his
think
kisses, I
though?
love his attention, but
Yeah.
it'd be nice to have hair.
What I think this reveals though, in some categories or subcategories, you can go on and on and on.
Mhm.
In others, it's fairly short and quick and simple, and the list is short. And so that says a lot about where one is at because is that kind of, I mean, would you say that's it, or is there something else that you could add to the ugly with regard to your
Oh
relationship
no, no.
with yourself?
I mean, there have been maybe opportunities to go on short trips or plan longer vacations or those kinds of things that we're very fortunate in that again we have 5 children. They're all older than Isaac, so my wife and I have been able to take trips and know that he's well cared for here at home while we're not here. So we've been very
Mhm.
fortunate in that. But there have been many other opportunities to kind of participate or do things that we had to decline because we had Isaac to be cared for, and
Mhm.
some of those things you miss or can seem disappointing. I don't, it is what it is. It's not the end of the world. But for me, I'm an extrovert. I'm a very social person, and
Mhm.
so not being able to take advantage of some of those social opportunities has felt disappointing for me, and kind of getting that woe is me, can't do all the fun stuff I'd like to do.
Mhm.
So that's again, I am very grateful for my son, and I can't say that enough. But if I'm honest, there are things that have come with caring for him that have forced me to defer some of the things that I would like to have done or would
Mhm.
like to do. So that's the reality, and at times it's hard, and sometimes my attitude's ugly about it, if I'm honest. But I
Well, let's
work on it.
especially since I'm looking at the time and realizing we have a wonderful problem on our hands in that this is going to be a two-part episode because
Hmm.
the pretty and the optimism is going to be in another episode because we don't have enough time for it. But
Hmm.
since that's the case, then give an example, if you will, of how that got ugly with you. And as you do that, I'm going to try and think of my own because I don't. I'm not sure about that.
Well,
Where. Go ahead. Yeah.
I'll give you a quick example.
Yeah.
Because I don't get that many social opportunities as I would like. When
Hmm.
I do get them, I have this tendency to want to extend it, make it, stay longer than I should. And so I'll give you a quick example. My brother invited me out to Indian Wells to the tennis matches, and this was a couple years ago, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so I went out there and hung out with him and his partner and some of their friends. Had a wonderful day of tennis and all that stuff, and then hanging out that night. Spent the night out there, and I had told my wife I'd jump on the road. Sorry. Told my wife I would jump on the road right away in the morning and head back. But then my brother's like, "Hey, you want to go to breakfast? You want to do this? Want to do that?" And it's like, I do. So I did. I went ahead and went to breakfast, and he showed me a potential property that they were looking at, and it ended up stretching out till I didn't end up leaving for home until I don't know 1 in the afternoon, something like that.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, was not aware. My wife was sick. My Isaac had diarrhea. It was just a mess, right? And where I would have been here to help care, I was out having a good time, and that was my wife was upset. I felt terrible because she was sick and then having to care for him as he was sick. And it was kind of because I wasn't there because I got greedy for my time away
Hmm.
from the house. And so I remember that and I feel really bad about it. So that's kind of my ugliness coming up and my greed for more coming up and
Hmm.
causing a challenge for those around me. So
Now, when that happened, I guess there's two questions I have. One is, did you call her to let her know that I'm going to be a little later or whatever have you? You're like, no, no.
no, because
Um,
honestly, I was going to get kind of
an
anticipated I'd
earful.
get some grief about that. Yeah, so I was like, no. So
So then let me ask
I'll
you
let,
this. So
go
so
ahead.
you didn't reach out to tell her you were going to be later than you thought. And
No.
did she reach out to you to tell you like, hey, where are you? Are you or anything like that?
Yeah, about the time I was, because about the time I should have been getting home, I guess,
Hmm.
was
Yeah,
about the time I was getting on the road. So she's like, "Yeah, hi, where are you?" And I'm like, I'm about to leave." And it was like,
right.
"Oh, really?" So you can guess where it went from there. So, oh, great, because I'm sick and he's sick and it's a mess here, and you're not here. So,
Can I think of an example of that where I don't even know if it's autism related, but I've just had a couple of situations where I've just that's happened,
mm,
where I just wasn't as present in my thought or whatever. I, as a result, have this thing where, you know, my wife is like selfless. Like if she was Supergirl, the S wouldn't stand for something on Krypton or whatever. It would stand for selfless.
mm,
You know, she's just like everybody first, everybody first. So if she
mm,
asked me to move a pebble, I can't move the pebble fast enough.
mm,
And my thought is like, is the pebble shiny? Does the pebble need to be cleaned? Is the pebble in the right spot? Is
mm,
it facing the right direction? Because that's what she would do. And every
mm,
now and then she might go, "Here, I got you this," and she'll might tell you something, or she won't say anything about it and she'll just do it.
mm,
And she's just a doer for others. So whenever I have a situation where I have not done that, I become Schlep Rock. I'm just like, oh no.
mm,
And there's a cloud over my head, you know? So
mhm, mhm,
um, I can relate to that.
mm.
Um, let's talk about how, and this is, I guess, the ugly as well, the last subcategory, how autism has affected your view upon the way you view society.
Well, in this very politically charged environment we live in now,
Hmm.
um, my empathy, my compassion, those things in me have been expanded because of who my son is and the communities I'm involved in. So it really kind of highlights the challenges politically here in the country now, and
Hmm.
I think it creates greater separation for me from those who have no compassion for immigrants, who have no compassion for the poor, who have no compassion or think, their tax dollars should go to themselves as opposed to helping to care for those who are less fortunate. And
Hmm.
so it has caused a greater level of frustration, honestly, in me, and maybe an animosity towards those who would choose um, that kind of opposite political um, direction. Um, and that's something I have to work on because well, I don't even know. Sometimes I feel like it's not something I have to work on. I feel like if you don't lead with compassion and empathy, um, then I don't understand you.
Well, here's
And
I want to reiterate something for our audience too. And me and you and I having these conversations about the state of the world.
mhm,
You said something to me to let me realize that that allows me to realize that what the statement you just made is not a political one, but a human one. And I
mm,
want the audience to get that as well. And what I mean by that is that I never knew how you voted. I mean, we're family. We known each other, forever, but I didn't know how you voted. And when we talked about the current state of things, you told me that for years you had voted Republican, right? And so I don't know that at this point you change any, where you're registered or whatever have you,
mm.
but I'm saying that to say, and I'm sorry, I just realized I didn't check with you to if to ask you if
Put
you
that out there.
cared
That's
about.
fine. No, I
Yeah.
mean I'm very open. For my, you know, most black families are democratic. I think that's a truth. My
Mm-hmm.
family very much was. For me, very early in my career, I was very focused on finances and that kind of keeping my money kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that pushed me. I was also very involved in church. And so for many years that pushed me maybe community wise or what I was surrounded by, kind of into that Republican space and that belief system.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll be honest, when the most recent leader of our country, came on the horizon, I'm like, no, can't go there. That doesn't make sense to me. So that was the beginning of my transition away from that belief
From
system
that.
and from that, yeah.
And that's what I wanted to state, because I know that you have just as much of a problem with any Democratic candidate that so overtly, I mean, whether it's overt or covert, almost doesn't matter. If there's a lack of empathy, there's a lack of empathy.
Hmm.
But the bottom line is, you don't care who it is that doesn't have that. And being a caregiver affects that, because I think if you live, like you and I are both in our 60s, so to get to that point and be someone who is remotely evolved or asking questions and trying to do so, it's kind of inevitable that you're going to have more compassion for others as you as you
I'd agree with that. Yeah.
as you get older.
As your
So
age. Yep.
yeah, so then the other thing that happens is you have less tolerance for, and I don't even want to say intolerance, because when we talk about tolerance with regard to how you treat people other than yourself in
Mm,
other communities, I always view, like here in Los Angeles, we have, you know, the Museum of Tolerance. Like, tolerance seems like something that you put up with. You know,
mm, mm,
you
mhm,
you
mhm,
shouldn't have to tolerate somebody else. You
mm,
should be
mhm,
curious about that person's shoes and their plight,
mhm,
especially because more times than not, there is the thinnest razor hair of a line that separates you from their given situation.
mm.
You know, and so we can talk about that on the next episode about the pretty as well, because it can also be pretty because you look for the best in people, but
Mhm.
when you but you also develop this complete intolerance for, and maybe that's not ugly, it's just a fact, but a great lack of patience for people that can't care about other people.
Yeah.
um, and
Yeah.
we don't have to agree, you know, we don't all have to agree. um, but as always, um, our time
Caring,
just
so I'll say caring and kindness is not political. I mean,
exactly, that's my point. Yeah, it's not.
again, I talked about being in church and it says in there, treat others as you would choose to be treated, right?
Hmm.
And for me, that's not political or religious. It's just the way life should be lived. And
Yeah.
so when when I see people who stand against that, and it's like, no, I want to be treated best and first, and I don't really care what happens to them, then I find no, it's very difficult to find common ground there because it's like
No.
that's a completely different worldview. I believe in inclusion and community, and it seems the you know what? I don't want to make it political. It makes it very difficult to find any
It makes
space
it
for
difficult,
alignment.
and
Yeah.
yes, and I don't know what's worse, someone being that way, or because you said some things that almost nobody will say. You know, is
Mm,
I don't care about so and so. I just want, people don't say that. What they'll do is they will mask, they will say it under the guise of, I don't know, freedom or hope or something. If someone
mm,
would tell me, just like if someone could say, I'm afraid that I will have less if you have such and such. I'm just, then you could have an honest conversation. Don't know what the outcome would be, but I
mm,
think it goes back to what we talk about in terms of consciousness, because most of us live our lives on autopilot. We don't even think about what we think about. We just
mm,
sort of
mhm,
just do what we do, and we are the way we are. And
mm,
if you are simply just the way you are,
mm,
that gets conflated with who you are.
mm,
And that is something that you can't possibly know if you're just doing what you do and being the way you are. And
mm,
so, with that said, the time has gone by as fastly quickly,
mm,
as it always does. I want
mhm.
to thank everyone within the sound of my voice. I want to thank you, Maurice. I'm so thankful for this platform and the time that we get to spend together.
Yeah.
And our intention, as Maurice said, is to make sure that you you realize that you are not alone. I again want to thank our partners, Billy Footwear, and encourage you to consider joining us for our bi-weekly call for the Den. And thank you for supporting the show. We will see you soon. Let's try and remember to be a little bit more childlike, less childish. Questions are more powerful than statements, and know that people need your love and your compassion. Thank you so much, and we will see you next time on Beyond the Spectrum.